I don't have a problem with white authors writing people of color in their stories.
Mm-hmm.
When researched well and, gone through sensitivity reading before it gets to me, the consumer, and I find a stereotype, staring
Mm-hmm.
back at me. I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is that they will spend more money, more time, more resources promoting and high-fiving stories written about us, not by us.
Terreece, thank you for making the time to speak with me today. It's really a pleasure to speak to a fellow author and creative.
Yeah, I'm excited to
Yeah.
be here.
Yeah, and we've known each other forever, but can you
Yeah.
kind of give the viewers a little bit, kind of a little overview of the highlights of your career so far?
Sure. I'm Terreece M. Clarke, and I am a journalist and an author. Right now, I'm heavy into my author phase, or not phase, I guess, era, author era, as the kids say, right?
Yes.
And I was a freelance journalist since like '99 to date myself. And I always gravitate towards stories and opportunities to kind of shine a light on people who aren't really represented. So that's shown up in my journalist work as part of, my focus on women and families and diversity in media. And it's now showing up in my books, whether it's my children's books, which are focused on developmental milestones and feature children of color, or my romance books, which always feature Black women as like the stars and centers of their own story.
Right. Now, were you one of those kids who always knew you wanted to be a writer? Or
No.
is it how did you get into writing?
So growing up, I never really made the connection between loving to read. Like I always had a book. And I was an asthmatic, so I couldn't always participate in like recess and in the summertime, I'm the one stuck on the porch. So always had my head in a book. So I love to read and I love to create. And I always had like these little stories in my head, but I never connected that that could turn into a job or a career. Mainly because I just didn't see people like me. When you think of the great American author, who do you think of? You think of white men.
Hmm.
And so it was just kind of like a thing that I liked to do, and I would do it on and off, right? When I was graduating high school and kind of really thinking about what I wanted to do, it was still storytelling, but I was into journalism. So I thought I was going to go for broadcast journalism. But then I realized I really loved like the newspaper side, and kind of dove into that until I kind of realized that the places and the people I was working for wanted a specific angle on the stories that they were sending me on, right? So if it was crime and city and the like, they wanted me to bring that, I'm just gonna say it like that, thug angle, right? And I wanted to, whether it was crime or whatever, tell the complete story of the person, and if something has happened to your loved one and they're no longer here, um I don't just want to know the stories leading up to what's happened, but it's affected the whole community. How does this affect the community? How does their presence being gone affect the family? And they really weren't interested in that. And so I realized, okay, well, I'm not sure this is for me, and I really don't want to perpetuate these one-sided stories, right? So I went into corporate. I was like, okay, steady paycheck. Maybe this is where I'm supposed to be. It is not. I am not a corporate girly. And every so often throughout my career, I'll slide back in, that lure of benefits and whatnot sounds good at the time. And I last about a year and a half. But so freelancing started for me kind of as a fluke. I was getting into plus size modeling, and a friend of mine's had a really popular plus model website, and she reached out and asked me to write a column. And I was like, sure. I wrote it, and then she sent me money. And I was like, oh, wait, hold on. Does this happen all the time? Or and I remember going to Borders bookstore, and I was so broke at the time, I could not afford to buy the book. So I sat down and read Freelance Writing for Dummies and or Idiot's Guide, one of the two. I forget the brand now, but I eventually did go back and buy the book when I was able to afford to, just so I could have it for me. And I sat there, I went through it, took notes, and was like, I think I can do this. And so, and I've been doing that ever since. Even when I take on like marketing clients and that sort of thing, I writing has been the one consistent throughout all of my career. So
And
yeah, it's just continues to evolve.
yeah, just to backtrack a little bit,
Mhm.
where did you grow up and go to school?
Oh, Toledo, Ohio. So I'm still
Okay.
an Ohio girl, Northwest Ohio. And I went to
Hmm.
St. Ursula High School, all girls high school in Toledo.
Okay. Yeah, I went to it's a Catholic school, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I went to Catholic school here in Columbus, Ohio. You know, up through eighth grade. I went to Holy
Yeah.
Spirit, and then I just decided, and it was co-ed. And then it was a
Oh,
choice between St. Charles, you know, all boys prep school, or Bishop Hartley, which is co-ed. And I was just like, I'm tired of uniforms, and I want to check out public school. So it actually
right.
ended up being a good experience for me because I feel like it made me more well-rounded. Yeah, but you know,
Yes.
it's interesting. I was thinking, excuse me, when you were saying when you were reporting how you were kind of you know, I don't know if it was spoken or unspoken, sort of given that mandate of they want the stereotypical
Mm-hmm.
thugging. I heard Cord Jefferson, who's of course the director of American Fiction,
Mm-hmm.
say that the reason he got out of journalism, or a certain type of journalism, because it was the same thing. They always wanted this stereotypical quote unquote
Yeah.
black angle. So it just seems like it's a system wide issue in journalism.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
And it was never explicit. It was always very much implied. Whether it was changes to the story in the editing process, whether it was feedback on, well, what about this? And just some of the questions that were asked still, while I had maturity, some maturity on my side, I was still in my 20s,
Mm-hmm.
so it was sometimes harder for me to push back against that and to have the right verbiage
Mm-hmm.
to push back against that. I think right now is such a great time to be, even with all that we're going through and all the turmoil in this space, because the younger generations are giving us the words and the verbiage to express what it is that we're experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't, like I said, I didn't always have the words, and it got wearing, you
Yeah.
know, because I didn't grow up with a lot of money or anything like that. And in Toledo's working class anyway. And when you talk about the hood, and in the middle of the hood, that was my house.
Oh wow.
You looked on the map at pockets of hood, right there in the center is my house, right? And I never felt like there was something wrong with my community or my neighborhood. Didn't realize the vast differences in growing up in different, like I would say, economic situations until I went to St. Ursula, because I went to Catholic school, but it
Mm-hmm.
was in the neighborhood. So the
Okay.
neighborhood kids,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're all pretty much on the, same playing field.
Yeah.
St. Ursula opened my eyes. It's very, at the time it was, oh gosh, I think kids of color, maybe 13 to 20%.
Mm-hmm.
And just the economic difference, right? Very wealthy. So that was eye opening. Never realized that people actually did travel for spring break.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just thought, yay, you don't have school, because, when you saw these things, I knew that I was aware of them, but it was on TV. So that's TV. In real life, here in the world, you don't travel. You just don't have to go to school, right? No,
Yeah.
people were upset that they were going back to France. I was like, really? And
Yeah.
talking about their college funds. I was like, is that really a thing? Mom, do we have a college fund? She laughed. So that economic difference, I think and just the difference in life and what people outside of my community thought of my community
Mhm.
was really shocking to me, because I know these people as aunties and mothers and cousins and whole tribes and families, and this is the house that you go to if you get locked, you lose your key, and you know what I mean. It was community. It was
Mhm.
community. And so to go into someone else's community as a journalist and to say, I'm going to use this to represent this entire community. And it's a very one-sided um, kind of skewed viewpoint. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
I
I get
couldn't do
that.
it. So,
So
which is a
what
shame. I kind of wish I could have stayed in it and worked against the system and made a difference. But then on the other side, I realized it's a huge system to stay in and work against to try to make a difference.
yeah.
So I make my differences in other ways.
Yeah, and your mental health is important
And
too.
that.
Yeah.
And that.
Yes, yes. So how did you make the leap from journalism to writing your first children's book, which was Olivia's Potty Adventures? Is that right? Or
Yes.
okay.
Yes. Um, necessity.
Mm.
So when I'm a big nerd, so both my
Me
husband and I
too.
are big nerds. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So anything we encounter is like, okay, let's go find a book for it. Let's go learn this thing, right? So we had kids and got books for that. It was time to potty train. Let's go get some books for that. And while there were plenty of, on the parent side of potty training books, we wanted to make sure, we got books for the kids, and there were, at the time, it's gotten much better. At the time, there were no books with children of color, any color,
Mm.
besides Dora the Explorer.
Yeah.
And we'll give Dora her props. For potty training, it was animals, it was licensed characters, and blonde hair, blue eye babies.
Hmm.
Which awesome, but I wanted to see, some babies with braids or Afro puffs, something that my child could look and identify with who she sees in the mirror. And I was frustrated and with the first baby, and I'm like, gosh, there's nothing really out here. I'm looking. That passes. Second baby, same thing. Third kid, I'm like, this is really ridiculous. Why isn't this here? And I'm steadily fussing. Now, this is years of fussing. And then, as an aside, my husband's walking past me and he's like, why don't you write it? And I'm like, I don't write fiction. Why don't I write fiction? Could I write fiction? And I was like, well, maybe. And I'm like, you kind of just rolling around in my head and get all my great ideas in the shower. And I'm in the shower and it comes to me and it's Olivia. And the first three lines come and I'm like, oh, okay, well, let's see where this goes. And a little bit of this here and a little bit of that there. And I had some friends in publishing because at the time I was freelancing and I had some marketing clients. And my client was a comic book and graphic novel creator. So I had met some people within publishing in general. And I reached out to a couple, and one was really interested. And so we were able to collaborate, and boom, Olivia's Potty Adventures. It spent, I think, 16 weeks as an Amazon #1 new release in its categories, and then 32 weeks um, past that as between #1, #2 bestseller. So it was
That's
needed.
awesome. Yeah.
It hit
Yeah. I
at
was
the
just
right
gonna
time.
say. Yeah, I was just gonna say it goes to show you were fulfilling a need. There were other parents and just readers in general who were looking for books with children of color and Black children specifically.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
it just happened to kind of coincide where more celebrities were getting into that space.
Oh,
So
right.
Spike Lee had his Please Baby Baby Please
Yes.
book, and I want to say is around the same time that I can't think of his name now. Um but it was talking about his brown skin. Chocolate
Okay.
like me, or I can't quite remember. But yeah, so there was light being shined on that space, and research was being produced that I want to say it was like at the time, maybe 10, 13 or so percent of children's books published were had children of color or were written by people of color. That's gotten somewhat better as far as featuring kids of color. Unfortunately, written by people of color is still kind of staying the
Okay.
same.
Right.
So our stories are being told, but not by us. And so you're seeing more indie authors kind of filling those spaces.
Right. So how did you make the transition into romance? And your latest novel is Heartbeat?
Yes, the
Okay.
first novel in the series is Heartbeat, and I've
Okay.
got two since then. So,
Hmm.
which Love Never and Chaser, and I'm working on my fourth one coming out in May. So I've always been huge into romance. At ages that I really should not have been. Really should not have been reading that. But we always talk about how as Gen X, and millennial kids kind of didn't have much supervision
Yeah.
especially when it came to our reading materials, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know if you can count Flowers in the Attic and that VC Andrews run as like romance, but that kind of kicked it off.
Hmm.
But I was, reading Terry McMillan and BB Moore Campbell and all of those. And that was great because they had Black, protagonists, right? And then a lot of like Harlequin and clinch covers, rip bodices type of situation. And love them. It's a great escape, right? Um, and I had put that down for a while and really not reading for pleasure or anything because I'm so focused on work and kids and life and family. And there was a summer where basically like the economy tanked. All of my clients dried up. I could not get hired anywhere. Everyone gave me that overqualified situation. So I'm like in the midst of panicking. Um, I'm trying to kind of like balance myself, right? So I'm panicking because I need a job. I have children. You know what I'm saying? My husband's doing what he can, but the economy is tanking. Something has to give. And so I get back into romance, kind of as a break in between panics. And one these characters just came to me. They would not leave me alone. And I know to people who don't process things in the way that I do. It sounds out there, but these people were having conversations in my head. I could see these scenes. It would wake me up out of sleep. I was in the shower. They would come to me in the shower. And I'm like, okay, this is wild. Now, I thought we were going to be doing children's books.
Hmm.
Why are we? What's happening here? Okay, it's just my feral mind, I call it, right? So I'm gonna get a notebook and I'm gonna write it longhand like Toni Morrison does. I'm just gonna write these scenes, get the voices out of my head, and I can go on with my life. That summer, six notebooks later, I look down like, okay, maybe we have something, right? And so I don't write linear, beginning, middle, and end. I write the scenes that I'm excited about, and that keeps me from kind of falling into that blinking cursor, nothing's happening type
Yes.
situation, which is horrible.
Yes.
It's not foolproof, but it does help. And so it was like a puzzle. So I, kind of moved scenes around, like literally tore the notebooks apart and stapled pieces together. And I had Heartbeat. Now, this was all written longhand. And so I'm, feeling very Toni Morrison. I'm like, yes, we've done this thing. Realizing Toni Morrison has money and she has people to transcribe this crap.
Yes.
Handwritten notebooks to something that you can now submit or produce or whatever. So that was a process. That was a process of going through and doing all the typing up and really being irritated with myself
Yeah.
and kind of ready to throw these notebooks away. But that was in 2016, 2017, and then I sat on it and was just it's that creative fear of putting something out there that sucks. you know, I thought it was a good story, but I made it. What do I know? You know what I mean? And so, and this was not a direction that I was heading in, I thought. Um, Even that whole who am I to put out this, a book, right? So I kind of like slow walked it, right? So every so often I'd let somebody read it and, get some feedback. I didn't realize at the time, I'm kind of just drawing out the process of publishing. So that was my beta testing, right? These different like personalities coming together to read this book. And I took their feedback and kind of reworked and revised it and did a lot of things. Started releasing it chapter by chapter on Kindle Vella, which is kind of
Mm-hmm.
like a serial situation, and you can update it however many times, as much as you want, 2-3 times a week or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I had done that with my beta readers, kind of like going over each chapter before I sent it to them, to make sure it was as clean a copy as I could get it. And that harkens back to my, young and the restless growing up with my granny kind of days, right? Every afternoon with guiding light. And so Kindle Vella kind of moved that along. Then my husband took ill and it was life threatening. They were giving me that look that they give you, they're like all positive with him, but they're looking at me like, ooh. So he came through it. And I remember sitting next to him. He's laying on the couch so he can be like, around the kids and they don't have to like troop to the bedroom and stuff and be a part of the household, and not like stashed away because he's ill. And thinking it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, I can't sleep. Um, what am I waiting for? Nothing is guaranteed. I am not guaranteed more time. At the time, my husband was 46,
Mm-hmm.
which is very young to think about leaving this earth.
Mm-hmm.
And I am one of those people who my concept of time operates differently than folks. So um, I do, and I think it's also, your youth, and you think about
Yeah.
mortality, but you don't think about it as preciously as you should, right? Not in a morose way, but just as in get your ass in gear kind of way.
Yes. Yes.
And it was, what are you waiting for? And I was like, well, I'm afraid. Afraid of what? What's the worst that could happen? What's the worst that could happen? You put a book out and it's not well received. Okay. And then did anybody die? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Is it
Yeah.
going to break your soul? Oh, how many articles have you written that people didn't like or, editors tore apart? You just do it. Stop, you know. So I made that commitment. I was working a corporate again in tech this time. And I was one of the first of that nice starting wave of getting rid of people.
Mm.
So I was going to stay until I think July so I could collect my bonus in June, use that kind of as a launching pad. I was let go in May before the June bonus.
Oh, wow.
Like, son of a, I had plans for that money. But also, it's telling because on the Zoom call, the 3-minute Zoom call, you've spent 2 years, but you get 3 minutes, right? In which they say, yeah, it's not whatever, blah, 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 peace. And the first thing I thought was, oh, thank God.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that something that someone should? I mean, I've got 3 kids, one in college, 2 in private school, a husband who's ill. And the first thing I thought at being released from my job was, oh, thank God. Because all I wanted to do was write. I'm sitting
Yeah.
there looking at spreadsheets like I would rather be writing. And I had that feeling to leave, to leave, to leave, to leave. Excuse me, but I kept putting it off. Well, I need a couple more, checks under the belt. Well, let me get past this tuition payment. I'm gonna stay until my bonus.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember hearing Oprah, someone on Oprah, I don't think it was Oprah herself who said, um, God, the universe, whatever it is that you believe in, gives you whispers, gives you nudges. And those nudges get bigger until you
Yeah.
listen. So the whispers had been there, and I'm like, okay, well, give me a little, So then the brick wall, since you don't listen, I can be a bit hard headed. I'm gonna be hard headed. So the brick wall hit, job's gone. Now what are you gonna do? I was like, okay, well, let's put this book down. Because I had been prepping it, so it wasn't a super rush, but like I said, I was let go in May. At the end of June, Heartbeat was released, and we've been doing really, really well, really, really well. So, um, it's a lot because it's an indie release, but I really wanted my hands in every part of the process. I wanted to learn the process, and I wanted to be the one in control and making these decisions around it. With the children's book, it was a small press publisher, and they were awesome. There were things that I wanted to learn more about that wasn't necessarily their job or responsibility to kind of walk me through. And then there were decisions that I would have made a different decision, that I was just like, okay, well, next time I think I might go this route. And in publishing now, especially for new authors, a
Mhm.
lot of your like marketing and that sort of thing falls on you.
Mhm.
People think
Yeah.
you sign that dotted line and suddenly, they're pushing to get you on the New York Times. That is not the case. Not for
Yes.
most of us, right?
Uh-huh.
So I'm like, well, one, the book is she's a thickums. She's I keep on here. That's a thick book, especially for
Mhm.
romance, right? It's not fantasy, it's straight romance. Like 150,000 some odd words. They were going to cut a lot of things, and I knew where they would cut, and those are things that I really wanted to keep in. So I was like, it's going to be a hard sell. It's going to be a long sell because it's a long process, right? You have to get the agent, and the agent has to shop it around, and then it's not like they publish it right then. So you've got a
Right.
year or two before I needed to get moving then.
Mhm.
Just for my own sense of urgency. And also, I needed the money. Let's go. So I was like, if I am going to do all of this work and make sure I have a platform and all of that, which is what traditional publishing houses want, and then have to wait years and give you 40, 60 to 60%, depending on the deal,
Mhm.
why?
Right.
I mean, I have no expectations for where this book is going to go. I knew I could sell 100 copies. I knew
Mhm.
between friends, family, and a couple of randoms, I was going to have 100 copies out there, right? Um, so that was the goal: sell 100 copies and see what happens, see how the process works, and improve and do it again the next time. Um, and so I sold, like, my pre-orders were more than what my goal was, and I was like, okay, awesome. Now what? Well, then I read that most people don't sell beyond 300 copies. Okay, well, that's the new goal, right? And it just kept moving the goal until we were really kind of really motoring along. It's still romance is a great genre, it's huge.
Yes.
Thousands,
Yes.
I won't say thousands, but a whole lot of subgenres.
Mhm.
But I will say thousands of books and authors releasing something every single month. Um, so there is, and I don't call it competition. There is a lot of um, players in the area that you have to work really hard to kind of get noticed and seen, and really get your marketing tight and find your tribe, and replicate and expand that. And I don't call it competition because romance readers are ravenous. They read like nobody's business. It is
Right.
not unheard of for, 2, 3, 4 books a week, a book a day. You know what I mean? If they're really like
Yes.
on a motor. So there is not competition, I don't think, because there is not an author. I don't, and James Patterson doesn't do romance, but like Nora Roberts. There is not an author alive, whether it's Nora Roberts, James Patterson, whoever, that can satisfy all of
Yes.
those readers.
Yes.
No
Yes.
way. No way. Now maybe now with AI, but that's crappy writing. So
Yes. Yeah, not real writing,
it's just
literally. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So even with ghostwriters, that would be like a tremendous undertaking. And so most of the authors in that genre are not in that scheme, right? So the audience is huge. Excuse me, it's only getting bigger. And so I never view, even within my genre, even, telling similar stories, because there's only so many iterations, right? That you're coming up with, or as maybe say, I'll say tropes. Um, I never view it as competition, because what one author gets today, there's plenty of room for other authors to get tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I caution myself, and sometimes you get the looky loos. You look over and see somebody doing something. Ooh, I like that. I wish I could have that. Why
Yeah.
don't I have that? But it's always kind of, I work to kind of center myself back to, okay, but what are your goals and your definition of success? Because if I measure it by other folks, I'll never get there. I'll never get there. I'll never be satisfied, because there's always going to be, like I said, in this huge genre, the next thing that you can, move for. And if you don't like kind of recognize and celebrate what you have done, one, what are you doing, right? And two, it's just this treadmill that you never feel satisfaction, and I think that affects the writing too.
Do you feel any kind of particular challenges as a Black woman writing romance? Are
Oh
there a
heck
lot
yeah.
of
Oh, yeah. So whether it's economic, because I'm not, um because of my husband's illness, I'm not in the position where a lot of writers are, in particular, writers who are more well off. If they're on a single family income, there's still a partner that's
Mhm.
covering all the house bills and everything. And so
Right,
anything they make, they can put back into the books.
right.
Mine is divided between making sure we live.
Yes.
you know, kids want snacks, they want to eat 3 times a day, every day. I don't know where they get that from. And you got to have, electricity to type on your computer, right? And then, funneling back in the books. So that's a bit of a barrier. But as far as specifically as a Black woman, you still have, which is it strikes me as so odd, that you still have people who have decided that they cannot identify with our stories because they
Yes.
can't see themselves in there. I'm like, what is so hard to see yourselves in somebody falling in love? It's the same story. Even, and I don't write urban romance, but for authors who write urban romance, there's that, nose up in the air kind of situation, and oh, it's so this, it's so that. But they love mafia romances.
Mm,
It's
mhm,
literally the same thing,
mhm.
different nationalities.
Yep.
The same thing. Um, and so that is incredibly difficult. Um, and with fiction is wonderful, because we always talk about fiction can take you to new places that you've never been, and fiction allows you, to put yourself in someone else's shoes that you cannot do in real life.
Mhm.
And so I think, I don't it's not just I think, it is that it grows empathy and connection to the humanity of people. And so when you automatically put up this wall, right? um One, you're missing out on rich, diverse, uh just, there's so many well told stories, especially of indie authors, that are not getting the pub that they should, over kind of run the mill, less
Formulaic.
creative, yes,
Yeah,
formulaic, less
yeah.
creative endeavors, by quote unquote mainstream
Mhm.
uh, authors. And so you're really missing out. One,
Mhm.
two, you're saying to a group of people, whether it's people of color, people of different abilities, you know, uh, whatever, anything that supposedly is we lump under diverse, which if all of this is under diverse, it isn't really minority and other. You know what
Yeah,
I
that's the
mean? Because
majority of the
there's
population. Yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Um, you're missing out on connecting with people in a way that you're not going to be able to connect with by. And I love the news. I'm a journalist. The
Mm,
news stories and what you see on social media, because your social media, and I remind people of this every time they talk down on it, your social media is a reflection of what you are interested in. You are telling them what you want to see. Now, does the algorithm still kind of skew that into what they want to show? Absolutely. But
mhm.
whatever you hate click on, that's what you're going to see more of.
Yes.
So you don't like it, change what you're putting in there,
Assuming. Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, change what you're engaging with. Um, and you can see it's super easy. Anytime, and they go, well, how do I change? Blah, blah, blah. Have you ever searched for a pair of shoes? And the next thing you know, you see the shoes? It's the same thing. Stop clicking on stuff that pisses you off.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? And click on the things that you're actually interested in, that you think promotes, goodness and kindness or whatever it is that you're into in the world. Um, and then people kind of get irritated with that because they're like, well, what are you trying to say? I'm trying to say you're creating your own reality. So stop it. It's your responsibility, no one else's. But to that end, we also create these silos, right? These echo chambers. And so we think that that's all there is. And unfortunately, then as a Black writer, we're outside those silos. So publishing made a promise, like many, many, many other companies post George Floyd,
Right.
that they were going to take these stories seriously and they were going to actively engage, and they're looking, agents are looking, sign up, this, that, and the other, right? Book Talk, TikTok with focused on books, comes along, and it is awesome. Majority of my sales come from people clicking through from TikTok. That's how they discover me. The issue is, like any other media, certain people are picked out as the darlings,
Yes.
and they become the echo chamber of what's cool, hot, new, and interesting in books, like anything else. The problem with that is that then you have these people touting it, people who are getting into the sphere think that that's all there is. And since this promise of publishing, we've actually been pushed out further marginalized. And then it doesn't help that TikTok itself has admitted in the past it did suppress videos of brown creators, dark brown faces. They would suppress videos of people not conventionally attractive,
Mm,
hashtags that are specific, like, if you, just like any other search engine, TikTok is a search engine, so you put in books, romance books, or romance books rex, and what you get when you put in romance books rex and what you put in romance books rex Black women
mm,
or Black romance,
uh-huh.
vastly different, right? But a lot of people don't know to take that extra step. Now here's the thing, why should you have to?
Exactly.
Why should you have to put in Black? But you have to do the same thing in Google. So these biases that people inherently have show up in their work, and that work is tech. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
you're fighting against that. You're fighting against preconceived notions. You're fighting against harsher judgment of your work. I have read books that are um, indie, that have been picked up by traditional publishers, and traditionally published books that are ass. To be honest, whether it's the whether it's the storyline, whether it's the writing, it's not very nuanced, or it's just kind of tic tac toe kind of situation. Whether it's down to the proofreading, the number of errors and issues that you find in it, and these are gone through editing, copy editor, proofreader, all of that still have issues, right? But if you're a person of color, your books get completely just obliterated, you know, and you're reading these reviews. I read all my reviews, but again, I come from a journalist background, so they don't hurt my feelings.
Mhm, mhm.
I'm kind of used to that, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing like an editor in a JCOM class. So everything else after that is easy.
Yeah.
But you read these reviews and you're like, you gave 2 stars because of commas. You gave 2 stars because there were typos. You 1 starred and you DNF'd it because the first 3 lines was missing a period. Are you kidding me?
Mhm.
Now, should you put out the best work you could possibly put out? Absolutely. Do things slip through? Absolutely. But traditionally published and white books are not held to the same standard. So you're fighting against all of that. Um, and the idea that you only really get popular, whether it's book talk, whether it's podcasters, what have you, during February. Now everybody wants to read diversely during
Right.
February. Just February, we're here 365.
Right.
So it's no different than us in any other industry. Um, the algorithms really don't help. Um, but I mean, and then you have the other thing where I don't have much of a problem. I really the concept. I don't have a problem with white authors writing people of color in their stories
Mhm.
when researched well and gone through sensitivity reading before it gets to me, the consumer, and I find a stereotype, staring
Mhm.
back at me. I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is that they will spend more money, more time, more resources promoting and high fiving stories written about us, not by us, than authentic stories from us.
Yep.
And that's disheartening. I think that's probably the most disheartening thing. When I can read a story and you say they're Black, but they could be literally anybody other than you saying they were brown,
Right.
that's a problem. That's a problem. You've missed something. And there's such a reaction on the reader side when content creators and authors talk about reading diversely, it's a visceral reaction. They get angry. There's been viral red-faced 10-minute long rants against, I don't want to have to read diversely. I don't want to read, I don't make my reading political. I just read good books. What are you saying?
Yes.
These are what we're talking about are great books. No one suggests an ass book. you know,
Right.
no
Right.
one's like, this book is terrible. Go out and read it. No one does that. As a community, you always want to put your best foot forward, right? So it's
Exactly.
not that. But your assumption is that these books are not great books, not well written, and political. It's the same stories
Mhm.
told from our perspective,
Mhm.
our community.
Yes.
And I really, I've always read diversely without knowing that that was a thing.
Mhm.
Um, because it tickles me to find the commonality in our human experience.
Yeah.
Um, and then with the flavor of the individual's culture or lived experience, right?
Mhm.
So, and then it helps me see what life is like for other people in a community, in a lived experience that I don't live. And so I just, well, that's what we're fighting against. Those are the issues that we confront on a regular basis. I will say though, um, overwhelmingly so, amongst Black authors and people of color, LGBTQ, we are kind of forming this Voltron of support of all coming together, to highlight, to support, and to shine a light on our books. And then a lot of creators do a great job of not only creating these lists of books to read for various genres, subgenres in the romance space, but kind of calling to task, how do you read diversely, how do you check your own bias before you step into a story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's awesome because, again, like, I'm using mafia romance because it's super popular right now, or even hockey romance, super popular right now. People will complain about a romance written by a Latina author that interminces Spanish within the story,
Mm-hmm.
but will love and read and go look up what bratva means in a Russian mob romance or an Italian mob romance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, it's the same thing. It's not you're not having to translate the entire book. You know what I mean? So you need to like stop for a second. Like, why is this affecting me? And I think that's the beauty of romance, is that modern romance is injecting all of these, is stretching it, and it's stretching what the genre can do and the topics that we can tackle. Kennedy Ryan says it really, really well, is that you can dive into things knowing that in the end there's joy, because that's the requirement of a romance, right? You have a central love story. I would say a central couple, but it's not always a couple. Why choose is a thing. You can have a mate or 12. So it is wide open. There are literally almost no rules other than a central love story and a happily ever after. That's it. And so when you think about, like, when you take that box and those lids off, what all you can do, um, it's beneficial. And so many people are like, oh my God, thank you for putting that in there. One of my stories has a woman with polycystic ovarian disorder or syndrome. That's what it is, PCOS. And, so many say, I've never read a story with someone who has that. And it's those touch points, again, that connects, that brings in humanity and community and realness into these stories, that you can still have it fantastical. I mean, she has PCOS, but the sister's jumping out of airplanes because she skydives, and you know what I mean? There's these, mine has very dramatic kind of romantic suspense situations, but she has that human connection because she has this disease that a large number of women have. So there's that growth in that, and there's that opportunity to grow the audience, or I would say picking books that have those different experiences allows you to kind of grow yourself. And isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? And it doesn't have to be hard, because again, in the end, we all live happily ever after. Yay.
Terreece, I got you have left us with some real mic drops. Well, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you, and let's please do this again.
Yeah.
And how can people? How would you prefer? What's the best way if people want to read your books? If people want to like send you a DM, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Right. So I'm on social media everywhere at Terreece, my name, Terreece. I'm mostly on TikTok and Facebook. You can catch me on Instagram. My website is TerreeceClarke.com. You can purchase books from there. You can get them on Amazon. Or if you like small booksellers, you can also find them usually there. And if not, they can order them.
Awesome. Well, Terreece, thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This has been
Okay.
awesome.
All right. Let's keep in touch. If you like this video, please leave a comment, share it, and subscribe to my channel.